Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to another episode of Sisters with Ventures. I have my lovely guest today, Miss Qiana Patterson. How are you doing?
I am wonderful because I'm sitting here with you.
It's so lovely. We are in these lovely Los Angeles streets.
We are in these lovely sunny, I hope it was sunny, but it's not sunny
It's kind of
today.
gloomy today.
Just a little bit. We got the May gray early.
Oh, goodness.
You remember that.
LA people don't like it when it's not sun.
Luckily, I'm from Seattle, Washington, so this is all good
As
for
long as
me.
you don't jump off a cliff.
No, listen, I don't know not one person who's jumped off a
That
mountain.
is so good.
Not one.
'Cause I get
There's a lot of
depressed.
joy in Seattle, Washington.
Thank you as a black woman from Seattle.
Yes, very much so.
So Miss Qiana and I met about a year ago at University of Southern California Black Alumni event. Go Trojans! We're in LA.
Fight on.
Fight on. And I went to the Marshall School of Business.
Yes.
And you are a big time institutional investor.
Yes, and an LP.
You're an LP. You're an angel. You're many things and many titles.
I have had many titles, that is correct.
And before this, you were a school teacher.
I was a middle school teacher, the best profession, the best grade level ever that you could teach.
In LA Unified.
Here in LA Unified,
Wow.
public school teacher.
So this is not a career progression story, you know. And maybe it's similar. Maybe working with children or working with founders or
Listen. What I like to tell people is that working with kids is actually really no different than working with adults. Kids are literally just younger humans. They have emotions. They're trying to figure themselves out in the world. They have less knowledge, right?
Yeah.
But they are human just like an adult is. So, ushering them through the various stages, the mired stages of themselves from 11 to 13 is pretty joyous and crazy and chaotic, but I wouldn't change it for anything in the world.
Oh, that's so sweet. And I know in LA you've been very active in Pledge LA, Captail Coalition, and we'll talk about the office you work for and to share with people all different forays into venture, right?
Yeah.
So I work for Corporate BC, I think people know that. But there are many ways of what we call institutional investors. And this is so exciting to talk to you about your story because I think you'll give us a lot of new perspectives. But first, I want to know about Qiana from Seattle. Can you share a little bit of your origin story?
Yeah, totally. Born and raised in Seattle, Washington. My dad was in the Navy, and he's originally from the South, from Louisiana. And he likes to tell people that he got stuck in Seattle, and the reason why he got stuck in Seattle is because of me. I was born. And my mother's side of the family had migrated from the South, also from Louisiana.
Yeah.
My grandmother was, in that generation that migrated to Seattle and set down roots there. I was a public school kid. And I was really precocious, really inquisitive. I asked a lot of questions as a kid. I really wanted to understand why the world was the way that it was and why it moved the way that it did, why was science the way that it was. And I just got involved in everything that I possibly could as a young black girl in a predominantly white schools, and just excelled from there. Played basketball. I was a cheerleader. I was in honors classes, but I was still trying to figure out who I was and where I was supposed to go. And being a first-gen college student, not having a lot of social capital. I like to tell people I grew up in the shadows of some of the most iconic companies in the world, not in the state of Washington or in the country, but in the world. When you think about Amazon and Microsoft and Boeing, these are like game-changing companies.
Right.
And I grew up in shadows, and I didn't know not one person who worked for any of those companies, not one.
Right.
So when you think about my origin story and that connection, essentially, right, to these like world-changing tech companies, being a black girl, a child in those shadows, and not having a distinct connection to them, but knowing that they were there, that I think that was a key driver for me and makes all the sense of why I ended up where I did.
Yeah, and let's talk to how you got there. We'd love to learn the story from, being a teacher to being a venture capitalist,
Yeah.
because I'm sure you were not an accredited investor when you were a teacher, because I'm sure we don't pay them enough money.
Oddly enough, I think I have some of my earliest pay stubs from teaching. I loved teaching. I loved being an educator. I just didn't know if I was better at something else. And I started out teaching at such a young age, right after, graduating from the University of Washington. I landed in Los Angeles and I took my anthropology degree and started teaching middle school. And if I look back at myself then, I could have totally seen myself staying in education. But I just had this gnawing thing in me. And subsequent years later, I realized what that thing was that was gnawing at me. It was probably two things. But at the end of the 7th year, I knew that I loved it, but I didn't know if I was better at something else. And I figured, why don't you try something else? And if you fail at it, you can always go back to teaching. It's not like there's going to be, there's going to be a stop at how many more teachers there can be. And there was going to be, a shortage of schools that I could go at. I'm living in a city that has the second largest school district in the nation. So,
Right.
I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what that actually meant. And that was in 2000. I'm dating myself. So, do the math if you'd like to know how old I really am.
You just had a birthday,
yes,
too.
Yes, I did just have a birthday. And that was, I think, in 2006 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, yeah, let's just go for it. Let's just jump. And people thought I was totally crazy because at that point, I wasn't actually even a teacher. Then I was an administrator. I was a dean of a very large middle school. And so I landed in an ed tech company. Good transition, right?
Yeah.
So it's the transition was from, teacher to admin to now going into work for an ed tech company. And if you can think about it, it's like, makes total sense. At one point in time, I would have been the end user of this product.
Right.
At one point in time, I was the buyer, right, of this particular product. And so who better than those types of people and personas to be able to then, go in and help a tech company build something for those users and buyers.
Okay, so you went from teaching to ed tech.
Mm-hmm.
And then how were you exposed to venture capital from that experience?
As I started progressing in that first company, I went from trainer to interim CEO in 5 years. And I started attending conferences, being around other ed tech executives and operators, and realized there was no one that looked like me in the room, ever. There's no Black people in the room, and I'm thinking the numbers of students of color in this country. How come the people who are building technology and solutions for both teachers and students in this country don't look like the students and don't look like the army of teachers and support staff in schools? And I realized there's this whole world of people who are founders and company execs, and then there's these investors, these people who are investing in companies, and they are getting to pick and choose. And I started attending conferences where those two groups were coming together, right? Investors and founders, and everybody in the room that had a tag on it that said investor, did not look like me. Right. And so thusly, most of the founders in the room also didn't look like me, and I set out that precociousness in me, that curiosity, sought out figuring out the why of that. And that propelled me to start helping early stage founders of color. A lot of them would come to me because they would see me speaking at conferences, and at that point knowing I was an executive, C-level executive in companies in the very space that they were trying to build in for guidance and things like that. Built relationships with investors as well during that time. And that was sort of the foray into, the challenges that I saw at that time in this sort of global K-12 ed tech space. There just wasn't enough builders that looked like me, and there certainly wasn't enough people on the other side of the investor table that looked like me, and started making some small angel investments into some companies that I thought had a good shot at, blowing things up and doing some really good things in the world.
So tell me about your first angel investment.
Well, that's a good question. First angel investment. This was during the time where everyone was talking about, well, we call it now the future of work, right? Back then, there wasn't a sort of this nomenclature around future of work, but they were talking about how was education and schooling going to change, right? And many different types of pathways to becoming a software engineer. And we knew that there was, obviously, people were saying there's something wrong with the pipeline, we don't have enough engineers. So there was these alternative sort of ways to get certifications and quickly sort of up the ladder in terms of software engineering. So you had a bunch of coding boot camps that started to grow and get funded. And there was one in particular, I don't know how they found me, but I think it was Twitter. Maybe it was Twitter, maybe it was something else. But there was this couple, married couple, who had started their own coding boot camp. The husband, Gregorio, had been an engineer for TMZ and some other very large companies here in LA. And his wife, Liliana, decided to start their own coding boot camp. They saw there was a glut, there wasn't enough, and they wanted to sort of, make sure that, people of color didn't get left behind. So somehow, some way, we connected, and they invited me to their first class that was graduating. That's, 15 years now since then. Their first class, I was at their graduation at that first class, and I just remember the faces of in that first class, the faces where they were now going to, go and work. And these since then, those engineers have gone on to work at Microsoft and some of the Google and some amazing companies. And I just studied what they were doing and really loved the fact that they were reaching out to a much broader group of potential software engineers. And that was the first angel investment that I made. I wasn't sold totally on whether or not we could totally reimagine education in the form of a boot camp, but I knew that they were onto something. And I wanted to, take a chance on what they were building. And they are still around. They're still growing. They're, at this point have graduated thousands of students. And it's amazing. That was my first one. So it makes sense. I've been this ed tech executive, and then we're thinking about the future of work. And here we are.
We like to tell people to invest in what they know.
Yeah.
Right? What your expertise is.
Or what you like, or what you're buying.
Exactly, and that is, part of what shapes your investment thesis and what you feel most confident in writing that check. So let's talk about how you got to get a check that you could write like that, because you were a teacher.
I was a teacher, but remember, by that point in time, I was
a dean.
That first check that I made was I was already in the ed tech space and had been an executive in a company for, at that point, probably 10 years.
So did you get equity? Did they exit?
They have not exited. They're still around.
Okay.
They're still growing. They have taken on some additional capital. I am formally an advisor with them as well. So I have both, advisor shares with them and also as an investor on their cap table. And so they're still around, they're still growing. So I'm still super excited and passionate about what they're doing. And, whether or not there's a huge exit, I imagine there will be a huge exit, because, again, you still start thinking about what are all the needs. Do you need not just front end or back end engineers?
Right.
Now we're going to need AI. We're going to need engineers who know how to prompt really good, the AI, the chat GPTs of the world. We're going to need, we still know that we need cloud engineers. We need people with all kinds of certifications and safety and things like that. So there's just no shortage of what can be done there. They're still around.
Good. So Qiana may have an exit in her future.
Well, I've had 2 exits already
excuse me, audience. Please tell us more about that.
I've had 2 exits, which is kind of cool. One is when IPO, and one which isn't doing so good, but most of the IPOs for the last several years haven't done too well. And the most recent one I had was at the end of last year. I actually invested in them 13 months prior, and then a private equity company, my favorite thing to happen, a private equity company came along and said, "Oh, buy you for, X hundreds of millions of dollars." And that was a really, really easy, non-sexy company that I invested in. But yeah, exit 13 months later.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's not typical, audience.
That is
13 months is not a typical exit.
That is not a typical exit at all.
That's luck.
That is.
And some insights.
I was gonna say luck and certainly insight, watching sort of the tailwinds of what was happening in the cloud infrastructure space. And I'm really big on like this totally non-sexy type of investing, right?
Yeah.
And watching the tea leaves of all that is amazing to do.
So let's talk about your transition so when you were in ed tech, you started angel investing, so you're already in the angel space, but then you moved into more institutional role. Can you talk about that transition?
Yeah, so, I was at this point in my career leading strategy for a mobility company. So I went from ed tech and K-12, and then I moved into like rideshare and mobility, which is really cool and awesome for me. I liken myself as like a B2B, hardcore like B2B enterprise SaaS person, but again, wanting to like learn new things and understand what are things that are changing around us in the world is super important. So leading strategy for a mobility company was really exciting for me, and still touched upon education. So I pulled still my expertise around that time. It was during the pandemic. So many things happened during the pandemic. I continued to do some SPV investing, so pulling other people's capital to be more like an institution, although it's deal by deal, and making investments and being sort of the manager, the GP into investments like that. And I did Black VC's Black Venture Institute. And I was a part of the first cohort of the Black Venture Institute. And I was around all of these operators just like me as well, who were starting to dip their toe into the world of investing, because I think, as you know, there was this sort of shift at some point a few years ago of getting more operators to become venture capitalists. And so a bunch of Black executives and operators taking this sort of, crash course into venture capital and things like that. And I did that course, was in the first cohort. And then I started thinking, do I seriously want to like be a full-time investor? At that point, I had done angel investing, SPVs, been with a venture-backed company, all those things that I think you go check, right? Mm-hmm. And then started getting recruited. Banks, I will not name the bank.
Okay.
Banks. They are still here. Their name is going to change.
Okay.
Yes. So banks, corporate venture, and some other VCs, and just started having those conversations. And there was another one, family office, that came along too, and just had a sort of a point where I needed to decide, what do I want to do? Do I want to go sort of the corporate VC route? Do I want to go traditional VC? Do I want to go family office? And I think even at that time, I didn't even know that family office thing was a pathway that I could go down. And, I met some really cool humans, and actually decided to go down the pathway of family office. And that was simply because it just felt right, mission aligned.
Can you define kind of what a family is and nuances that mean?
Yeah. I describe it as basically a a family, if you call it, could be an individual person who wants to take their own money. So they're not taking outside money, but they want to take their own money and make institutional-like investments, right? Not just one-off angel investments here and there, but they really want to take their capital, create a thesis, although some family offices, a lot of that family offices don't have a like rock solid thesis, but they do have an interest in certain types of things. Maybe it's akin to like where they made their money from, those kinds of things, and they want to invest, like an institution, but with their own capital. And so I'm lucky enough to be in partnership with a family office and an individual who wanted to take what he had built and grew, invest in founders of color and, people who are more likely to be minoritized in our society. And I say that with great specificity, right? I don't like to say like minority. Women are 50% of the world. Right. We are not a minority, but we have been made to be a minority, right? Because we have not been allowed in halls and rooms and tables and things like that. So I was very focused, and it just felt really aligned and mission driven around like the ethos of like how I came to be in this space. Like I looked around and I didn't see that people that look like me. So to get the opportunity to invest that way was really important.
That's exciting. And family offices, when you think of families, you think of the Carnegie Mellons, the Rockefellers, but essentially these are major gatekeepers of wealth. And so I think we think about institutional as these big corporations, but they're also just high, ultra net worth, I think is the term, individuals. And there's a lot of very quiet. Family offices are very quiet.
Most of them have no websites.
They have no website.
You don't know they exist.
You don't know they exist, but they are dishing out some major capital.
That's right. They are, and they're LPs and other funds. So the funds that you do know, right, the names that you do recognize, all have family offices as their LPs in their fund. Right,
right. Yeah. So I think that's just exciting to talk about that avenue because I think people don't consider that as an option. And it's definitely an option. And let's talk about being a Black woman in VC.
Whoa.
Go.
Whoa, that is a loaded...
We need to make it spicy.
That's a loaded question. How about we add, how do you operate as a Black single woman in venture?
Ooh. Well, I wasn't going to tell you.
I mean, if we're just going to...
Keep it real?
Keep it real. Let's just keep it all the way real. It is a very interesting place. And it is one that I can say, I don't know if I was totally prepared for everything that came my way and that continues to come my way. I can say that without a doubt. It is hard. I mean, when we look at the numbers, and I'm sure your audience and people who listen to your podcast regularly know the numbers, and the numbers for us is like 0%. Right. Let's just call it. It's like we almost don't exist. We are what I like to call oftentimes a rounding error.
A rounding error.
We are a rounding error, and because we have so few assets under management and things like that as Black women, we don't even register.
No.
Right? It's not even a rounding error because at least a rounding error you could actually like look and see, oh, okay, that's $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million. No, we're like, 1%, we're less than 1%. So
but we're the most innovative.
We're the most innovative, going to college more, starting businesses at record speeds. Like so much of that is happening.
Right.
And so so yes, I will say it's difficult because of the numbers. I think it's exciting because we do oftentimes as Black women, we know all of that, and we still forge a path. We blaze a path forward
Right.
regardless, no
Right.
matter what,
Right.
right? So the exciting thing is just like, well, how much can I mess up, right? Like, how much can you actually really truly mess up on here? So I think that's another thing that makes this like really positive and exciting is that there's just there's no limit. Like, because
Right,
we're
right.
like, we should just go forth as fast and as quickly as we possibly can. Run quickly. And then I think that the challenge though is that, like, because we have so few dollars under management, we can't invest in everybody. So
Right.
it pains me that I
Right.
can't invest
Right.
in all Black women or all women that I, meet, and founders and all
Right.
really great ideas. I just can't simply invest in them all. I don't have enough money for it.
Right.
Literally.
That's
right?
the dilemma.
That is the dilemma that we, and you know this, that
Yeah.
we've looked at deals together. We'll have to be like, oh gosh.
And it's not because they're not amazing
No.
or brilliant or have a
No.
good idea.
You just can't do them all.
We just can't do them all. And I think the other thing, especially working with Black women investors, is, we're exposed to so little.
Mm-hmm.
Try to find a Black woman, chat, GPT, AI, deep tech. It's extremely, and I know you know some because you know everybody, but, right?
I know a few.
So how many Black women engineers are there? I mean, it all stems from what we're exposed to, and we have to really broaden our exposure so that we get more comfortable investing across the asset classes. Because if you could just rely on me and Qiana and the other 20 Black women who are LPs, my background is fintech, your background is edtech, we can't cover all the spectrums.
We just can't.
Right? And somebody would have a good idea in the industry I know nothing about, and I feel uncomfortable.
That's right.
And because that person doesn't have a mentor in that space, it's very debilitating as a founder. And so I think we just have to encourage all of us to get out in these industries, get different exposures, disrupt our comfort zone, and expand our knowledge, however we can, right? Maybe that's going back to school. Maybe that's just working for a startup. Maybe that's in all different ways that we can expand our repertoire so that we can bring more. I think me and Qiana both share in bringing more investors with us who are first-time investors who've never done venture because we just can't, we don't have the capacity to write all the checks. And so we need more check writers.
That's right. We need more check writers. So will you come along with us on
Please, this is a personal plea.
Yes. There's going to be a number at the bottom. And
The
you
call.
call in, okay? And just dial in your credit card, please.
1-800, write a check. So this is a great way to close out. And I want to know, what would you tell young Qiana?
Oh, what would I tell baby Qiana? Go in the direction of your dreams, even if that dream is not yet there.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Miss Qiana, it's been
Miss Leisha,
a lovely evening with you.
thank you for having me here.
I mean,
And why did it take this long? This is what I
so
want to know.
I want to tell y'all a sidebar.
Listen.
People give me shade about who I bring up. I'm a baby mama, y'all. I'm literally like, who gonna pick up this kid? Did I pay the fee for school this week? Y'all want me in my show? Y'all just tell me. Tell me. I love y'all. I am not hating on any
I've
sister.
been listening, y'all. I've been listening. I've been watching. I've been retweeting. Somebody said, tell me some new podcast, Black women podcast. I was like, you need to download Leisha. You gotta listen. I said it too. I said it. And then I just was like, one day she's going to ask me, and I'm gonna be here.
Listen, if you a sister with a venture and you writing checks, call me. I mean, I want to know I want to know all of y'all. All of y'all. I'm not a hater. I love you, sis. I love you, sis. People think we cousins already.
Sisters. That's
I
what
know,
they
it's
said
the
on
eyes,
Saturday.
They're like, y'all relate to your
That's
cousin?
what they said on Saturday. That's your cousin? That's your sister?
I didn't get
Lord,
the height.
y'all. Yes, we are sisters in this.
Sisters in
ventures.
ventures. That was
right.
good. That was good.
I know. This is
Okay,
why.
so-
This is why you should have had me a long time ago.
This is
But
long
okay.
overdue.
Yes.
Long overdue, but right on time.
Right on time. Thank you. Thank you.
This is Resurrect Sucker. He wrote, she wrote. And here you are today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for gracing your presence.
How do we follow you, learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, although, that bird app or dog app, whatever it is today, y'all, let me be nice. You can follow me on Twitter, Qiana Patterson. You can find me there. You can also, we didn't talk about this, you can find me on LinkedIn too, all that regular good old stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we didn't talk about is Cap Table Coalition. So y'all, go to www.captablecoalition.com. If you are a Black woman, a person of color, whomever, and you are in this, you're an ally, you're in this world with us trying to help diversify cap tables and also back really phenomenal founders who just happen to be minoritized, you should join the Cap Table Coalition and write small checks. We are aiming at the Cap Table Coalition to diversify cap tables one deal at a time. And over the last year and a half, we had 2 years, about 2.5 years, we've deployed about $30 million.
Congratulations. That's significant.
Not my day job, y'all. Not my day job.
Just at night.
Please.
At night.
Night, weekends, in the between time.
That free labor.
Free labor, y'all.
We don't get compensated for angel.
Listen,
just want to let people know right now.
The advertisers, advertisers, are you here? Are you listening?
We need sponsorship.
Sponsorship. Okay, so this is a call, an open casting call.
It's an altar call. We're passing the plate.
Bring your wallets. Okay, your wallets, your debit cards.
Open
we take
mind,
Square.
Listen,
the benevolent fund is funding over here, honey. Okay.
This is what Avengers we need it.
That's
need
right.
It. Okay.
Sponsor.
We have to close out the show because it's happy hour and we're getting way too lit. I want to thank everyone.
We need to do cocktails.
Yes,
we need to do like a
when our
late
sponsors
night.
come.
Yes,
we'll be able to do that.
That's right.
I think Uncle Nearest might have a few bottles at this Black VC event.
Yes,
okay,
let's do it.
Well, that's a wrap.
Thank
you so much, Qiana. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Miss
In
Leisha.
your city and my city as well.
Yes, this is your city. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
Group
Thanks.
hug.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you.